In today's video, I'm going over everything that you need to know about reverse searing steak. This is genuinely a foolproof way to cook thicker than average cuts, and I'm confident that if you hang around until the end of this video, then you'll have the skills required to master it yourself in no time. So let's get into it. Reverse searing a steak in the oven like I'm about to do today is actually incredibly simple. I used to avoid cooking steak like this altogether, but I'm here to tell you today that you really shouldn't get too worried about this at all. When you're cooking something like this, you really want to take out the guessing work. And the best way for me to do that is to actually have a probe. If you have a little thermometer like this, I mean, you can pick these up on Amazon for like 40 Australian dollars. If you don't have a probe, you can easily pick up one of these to measure the temperature in the oven at all times throughout the cook. I definitely have a preference for reverse searing steaks that are over 1.5 inches, which from memory is about 3.8 centimeters. If it is under 1.5 inches, then you're better off just cooking it on a pan. The steak that I've got here is just over 5 centimeters, so that is more than enough for me to reverse sear. There's nothing worse than an under-seasoned steak, so don't be scared about how much you actually put on, especially for these thick cuts. And just a quick note as well for anyone that does or is fortunate enough to have a probe. Whenever I'm inserting it, I like to not only put it in against a grain, which means there's no big gaping hole when you cut it open, but I also like to put it away from the fat cap. Obviously, this steak doesn't have the most pronounced fat cap, but if it did, I would be cooking it like this. And if it has a probe in that point, it's impossible to cook that on the side. So I like to, like I said, put that in this part, in the thickest part of the steak. By the way, this is not a sponsored post. I just use meter. But as you can see, the steak is sitting at an internal temperature of 4 degrees. All you want to do is tap up the cook, ribeye, oven, and I like to aim for an internal temperature of 54 degrees. And then all we do is start the cook. It's as simple as that. Having it on your phone literally takes out the guessing work for what you're doing. But as you'll see later in the video, I don't really follow what the alerts say. I used to follow the alerts in the app and I would always end up overcooking it for what I prefer. So just before I get it in the oven, one of the most important things to note when you do cook it in the oven is to make sure that it's on the appropriate setting. So I like to have it on the fan grill setting, which is essentially going to just circulate heat around the steak. If you've got it on a forced fan option, it's going to really cook the inside of the steak too quickly. And I say that from experience. I'll put that on that setting and I will set the temperature to, let's go for 105 today. I'll get that in. If I was at home and I wasn't filming, I would have preheated this, but what can you do? So as you can see, we're about 37 minutes into the cook and we're sitting at an internal temperature of just over 21 degrees Celsius, which is when I like to actually give it a bit of a flip. I like to aim for an internal temperature of around 40 degrees Celsius. So yeah, I like to give it a flip at around halfway. So I'm gonna give that now. You could just use a pair of tongs here, but that's the whole thing about what I said before. You've got to be patient when you're doing this because that achieves or that allows for the best result. So we've just ticked over 36 degrees Celsius internally, which is when I like to start preheating the pan. So ideally, I probably would have done this a tiny bit earlier, but it's important, or it's very important to make sure that when you're cooking or when you're reverse searing a steak, that you've got an appropriately preheated pan ready to go as soon as you take it out of the oven. So we're coming up to 41 degrees Celsius internally, and it's taken me just over an hour to get to that point. So like I said, you do have to be patient. Put over my grill here, which as you can see, got a nice little layer of smoke. Yeah, I do like to keep it at a pretty high heat when I am reverse searing though, or when I am doing that final sear, just because you don't have too long to develop the crust, so you want that super hot. So we're at 41.5 degrees Celsius, so I think we're ready for the searing. It's important to make sure that you start the sear very or almost straight away. If you leave it out there for a few minutes, by the time you've let it rest, it's going to sit at around 44. So you don't have too long at that point. And then we get the grill press on. And as you can tell, that makes a big difference as well. It's important to note that at this stage of the cook, all you want to do is develop the crust. The steak is already cooked in the center, so if you cook it for too long on the pan, then it will develop a grey band, which you don't want. Give that a flip. It's been about 1.5 minutes, and as you can tell, that crust is really starting to come together. Tallow is a great way to develop the crust. Steak lad, beef tallow, of course. You don't have to use beef tallow though. You can use a high smoke point oil. You can use oil if you want, but it's going to smoke a bit more. I obviously have a bit of a bias for beef tallow. How's that crust looking? Look at that. Sizzling, sizzle, sizzle. And now that it's developed, I'll probably start flipping it every 30 seconds or so, to be honest. Give that another flip. That's looking beautiful. I've just hit 45. Give that, oh my God. Look at that. Start cooking the sides. And this is what I said before about cooking the sides of the steak. If you've got the probe on this side, on the other side, it's going to be hard to cook that side. So as you can see, we've just hit 46 degrees Celsius, and today I'm aiming for a beautiful medium rare, so I think it'll be perfect for me. So it's funny, it just hit 50 degrees Celsius internally, and it's telling me that I need to remove it from the heat. So this is what I said before about doing it yourself and doing it a few times, just because if you follow the alerts within the meter probe, you're probably not going to get the steak that you want. I'm going to give that a 5 to 10 minute rest, and then we'll give that a slice open and see how we went. I do like to give it a manual probe whilst it's resting as well, just to make sure that we've got the center of the steak cooked perfectly. So as you can see, the steak is sitting at an internal temperature of 54.6 degrees Celsius, which has risen around 8 degrees while it's been resting. Looks really good. As you can tell, crust is super well developed, and hopefully we have a perfect wall-to-wall cook. Which we do. I mean, this is like exactly why you would do a reverse sear. Super tender, tastes incredible. If you've got a thick steak, this is just the best way to cook it. There's nothing else that even comes close, and it leaves you with that perfect bite every time.